There are seasons in life when silence feels like God's only reply. You pray, you plead, you wait, and the heavens seem still, the doors remain shut, the path unclear, and your heart wonders if your cries were swallowed by the void. Yet, what if the silence was never absence, but preparation? What if every unanswered prayer, every delay, every restless night was not God ignoring you, but God arranging the stage for something greater than you dared to imagine? For just as the seed must rest in darkness before it breaks forth in light, so must your spirit endure the long winter before spring arrives. And now, after all the waiting, the whispers of heaven declare a shift. The right time has finally come. This is not accident nor coincidence, but divine timing. The hand that held you back was the same hand shielding you until the moment was perfect. And now, my friend, the season you longed for is no longer ahead of you. It has arrived. God has been waiting, and now he says, step forward.
Beloved, heaven has been holding its breath, waiting for this very hour. Every delay, every unanswered prayer, every season that felt heavy with silence has been building to this divine moment. What once seemed like a pause was never abandonment. It was alignment. God has been orchestrating behind the curtain, arranging pieces you could not see, and now the curtain is rising. This is not coincidence. This is not chance. This is destiny arriving right on schedule. The beauty of God's plan is that his timing is never premature and never late. Habakkuk 2 verse 3 reminds us that the vision awaits its appointed time, and though it may appear to linger, it will surely come to pass without delay. You may have wondered why doors stayed shut, or why prayers seemed unanswered, but the truth is, heaven was not ignoring you. Heaven was preparing you. A seed does not sprout the day it is planted. Roots must grow deep before fruit can ever show. Waiting seasons are not wasted seasons, they are where strength and resilience take root. Think of Joseph. His dreams were given as a boy, but his fulfillment came after betrayal, slavery, and imprisonment. What looked like detours were actually training grounds. By the time he stood before Pharaoh, he was not just a dreamer, he was a leader ready to steward a nation. That is the power of divine timing. Ecclesiastes 3 verse 11 declares that God makes all things beautiful in his time. Not rushed by impatience, not hindered by delay, beautiful, complete, and lasting in his perfect schedule. David carried the anointing of a king long before he wore a crown. Years of tending sheep and fleeing enemies were not wasted. They were shaping his heart into one that could carry authority without corruption. Isaiah 40 verse 31 assures us that those who wait upon the Lord renew their strength. The waiting that felt like exhaustion was actually a process of renewal. You are not weaker because of the delays, you are stronger, wiser, and more equipped than ever to step into what God has prepared. So often we misread silence as absence, but God's quiet seasons are never empty. They are the hidden workshops where character is forged, faith is purified, and vision is sharpened. He withholds what you are not yet ready to carry, not to punish you, but to protect you. Timing is a shield, not a chain. It keeps you from stepping into something that would have broken you prematurely. Heaven's pauses are heaven's protection. The enemy trembles at those who move only when God says move. He thrives in chaos and rash decisions, but he cannot outmaneuver someone anchored in God's timing. The adversary may have whispered that you were forgotten, but that was only because he saw what was forming. He fears what emerges from God's appointed hour, because no scheme of man or power of darkness can overturn it. And now the signal has been given. Heaven has sounded its announcement. The waiting has served its purpose. The refining is complete, and the appointed time has arrived. What was once deferred has now been delivered. The clock of destiny has struck, and the very thing you prayed for is unfolding before your eyes. But remember, the clock of heaven does not tick like ours yet. It always strikes at the perfect moment. We count minutes, hours, and deadlines, but God directs destiny through seasons, alignments, and hidden preparation. What seems like delay is not wasted time. It is divine order unfolding beyond your sight. Galatians 4 verse 4 affirms, when the fullness of time had come, God sent his Son. Heaven is never early, never late. It is always precise. Think of this. We panic when doors take longer to open, but heaven is arranging the right people to be on the other side when we walk through. Abraham waited decades before holding Isaac, yet the promise never expired. Time did not weaken God's word. It only deepened Abraham's capacity to trust. What you call waiting, heaven calls ripening. Just as fruit matures in its season, blessings manifest when hearts are ready to carry them without collapsing under their weight. Patience then becomes more than endurance. It is evidence of trust. 2 Peter 3 verse 8-9 reminds us that to the Lord 1,000 years are like a day, and a day like 1,000 years. Delay is not neglect, it is mercy. It shields you from premature exposure and sabotaged destiny. Imagine receiving influence before humility is formed, or wealth before stewardship is shaped. What was intended as blessing could become burden. God in his wisdom withholds until the vessel is strong enough to hold what he has planned. Every pause, every detour, every slow-moving promise is marked by his fingerprints. Your life is not at the mercy of accidents or missed chances. It rests in his sovereign hands. Psalm 31 verse 15 boldly declares, "My times are in your hand." This means that no clock in hell can override the calendar of heaven. What looks like delay is actually divine choreography. God is moving pieces in realms you cannot see, aligning people, resources, and opportunities so that when the curtain rises, everything is in place. Consider Joseph, sold as a slave, thrown into prison, forgotten by men, yet remembered by God. The waiting years were not wasted years. They were womb years, carrying within them the leader Egypt would one day need. When the time struck, Pharaoh's call came and no dungeon could hold him down. The same God who timed Joseph's release is writing your story with the same precision. This truth carries weight for your present battles. When you face closed doors, remember that some are locked, not because God is denying you, but because he is protecting you. Divine timing prevents counterfeit opportunities from derailing authentic destiny. The enemy wants you to leap at the first open space, but heaven knows that a wrong door can cost decades. Waiting sharpens discernment, teaching you to recognize not just what is available, but what is appointed. And here is the unshakable reality: when the set moment arrives, nothing can resist it. No conspiracy of men, no whisper of demons, no obstacle of circumstance can stand against heaven's decree. The Red Sea parted not one day too early, not one day too late, but at the precise moment Israel stood before it. Likewise, your breakthrough will not miss its hour. God's sovereignty guarantees it. Faith then becomes less about demanding answers on your schedule and more about aligning with his. The Spirit whispers, "Rest, for the author of time is also the keeper of your destiny." Every second of waiting is preparing the stage for a glory that cannot be stolen. Heaven's silence does not mean absence. It means orchestration. You are not behind schedule. You are not forgotten. You are right on the verge of heaven's unfolding. Trust the timing, for the set moment carries weight and certainty. The calendar of God cannot be rushed, but when it turns, acceleration follows. And when that strike comes, it will be unstoppable. You see, before the spotlight comes, the silence, and heaven does its best work there. Many fear quiet seasons, assuming they mean abandonment. But in truth, silence is often the womb of destiny. God does not waste hidden years. He uses them to refine, to prune, to strengthen. The very moments that feel like delay are actually the forge of preparation. Just as Moses spent 40 years in obscurity, tending sheep in Midian before facing Pharaoh, Sometimes the wilderness becomes the training ground for authority. Exodus 3 verse 1-4 shows us that it was in the quiet away from Egypt's noise that Moses first encountered the burning bush and heard the voice of God. The unseen seasons are not punishment but protection. Influence without formation breeds collapse. That explains why before crowns caves are given. David's psalms did not emerge from the throne room. They were born in lonely hills and dark caverns where only God listened. The beauty of those hidden melodies was that they shaped the heart of a king long before Israel ever sang his praises. Stillness, then, is not emptiness, it is intimacy. It is the space where applause cannot distract and pride cannot poison. When the world grows quiet, the spirit grows loud. 1 Kings 19 verse 11-12 reminds us that Elijah did not find God in the wind, the earthquake or the fire, but in the gentle whisper. That whisper can only be discerned when distractions are stripped away. You may think heaven is ignoring your cry, yet in reality God is drawing you closer by removing the noise that clouds your hearing. In the hush you learn the difference between your voice, the enemy's lies, and the Spirit's leading. That kind of clarity is priceless when storms rage later. The stillness also reveals who truly walks with you. Counterfeit supporters fade when progress seems paused, leaving only those anchored in genuine faith. Waiting seasons expose intentions, separating those who love the spotlight from those who love your soul. While painful, this pruning spares you the weight of false alliances when the real breakthrough comes. The ones who endure obscurity with you are often the ones heaven appoints to guard your destiny when it manifests. There is also a deep spiritual authority that only caves and wilderness can produce. Moses, David, Elijah, each emerged from hidden years carrying power that crises would later demand. Authority is not gained on platforms, but in secret altars where no one applauds but God. Those quiet seasons train the spirit to lean on divine strength, not human applause. They carve resilience that no trial can shatter. Even Jesus himself embraced this pattern. Luke 2 verse 40 describes him growing strong in wisdom and grace long before public ministry began. Heaven did not rush his emergence. It allowed time for stature to form. If the Son of God endured hidden growth, then how much more should we embrace the seasons where nothing seems visible? Those years are not wasted. They are sacred investments in your future assignment. What feels buried is actually planted. Roots must go down before fruit can come up. Underground growth is invisible to human eyes, yet essential for lasting impact. A tree that shoots up quickly without depth cannot survive storms, but one that spends years strengthening its roots can withstand anything. Your unseen season is not death to your dream. It is anchoring your destiny so that when it blossoms, it will not wither. And let us not forget the humility these seasons build. When success finally comes, the heart that has been hidden knows who deserves the glory. Pride loses its grip on those who remember the caves, the fields, the long nights of unanswered prayers. Preparation in obscurity protects against destruction in visibility. God loves you too much to hand you influence without first securing your foundation. So this is not a season to despise, but to treasure. It is in the unseen, uncelebrated, and unnoticed places that heaven forges steel into your spirit. Every hidden prayer, every quiet surrender, every unseen act of obedience is adding weight to your calling. The world may not see it yet, but heaven is shaping a vessel strong enough to carry glory without breaking. Friend, one word from heaven can bring closure to years of tears, silence, and longing. A single decree from the throne of God has the power to shift entire seasons, break cycles of delay, and usher in a reality you once thought was far beyond reach. What lingers for years in the realm of waiting can collapse in one divine moment when the Almighty declares, "Now." There are few things more breathtaking than the suddenness of God. In one dawn, Joseph awakened as a prisoner forgotten, and confined, yet by nightfall, he stood as governor of Egypt. The pages of Genesis record the unthinkable transition. What seemed impossible for over a decade was overturned in a single day. That is the nature of the God who rules time. It reveals that heaven does not delay. Arbitrarily, there is a set hour when all the hidden threads converge and destiny is released in its appointed moment. Think of the Red Sea. The waters did not trickle open bit by bit. They split in dramatic force the instant God gave the command. Exodus testifies that what looked like certain death transformed into the very path of deliverance. In the same way, your story can pivot in an instant. The same Spirit who raised Christ from the dead knows no limitation, and when His timing meets your readiness, miracles appear that redefine your future. Sudden moments of divine acceleration carry weight beyond imagination. Joel 2 verse 25 declares that God restores the years the locusts have eaten. Restoration is not limited to giving back what was lost. It multiplies, overflows, and redeems wasted time. One now from heaven can gather decades of scattered pieces and weave them into a tapestry that glows with victory. Delay may have bruised your faith, yet acceleration heals faster than time ever could. Consider the upper room in Luke 24 verse 49. The disciples were waiting, uncertain of what day the promise would arrive. Then suddenly, with the sound of rushing wind, heaven filled the space and tongues of fire rested upon each one. In that instant, ordinary men and women became bold witnesses who carried the gospel across nations. Notice how the Spirit did not enter gradually, but with sudden force, marking a clear line between what was and what had now begun. Such turning points often arrive when least expected. Those who prayed longest sometimes stand in shock when their answer manifests. The widow of Nain followed her son's coffin with no expectation that resurrection would interrupt her grief. Yet Christ stopped the procession and declared life. This is what happens when eternity steps into time. Sorrow halts, destiny advances, and testimonies are born that silence every skeptic. The now of God carries unmistakable authority. When heaven speaks, opposition loses footing. Pharaoh could not hold Israel when the Red Sea opened. Chains could not restrain Peter when the angel struck his side and led him past sleeping guards. Even death itself could not hold Jesus, for the stone rolled away at the appointed hour. Each account bears witness that no force on earth or in hell can override the decree of heaven. What makes these moments so remarkable is not only their suddenness, but their undeniability. When God moves, the fingerprints of man cannot claim credit. Isaiah 60 verse 22 reminds us that though things may appear small and delayed in its time, I, the Lord, will do it swiftly. That swiftness bears the signature of the Almighty, leaving no question who authored the miracle. You may have felt buried beneath years of silence, but the ground that covered you was only preparing to reveal a greater harvest. When the command of God resounds, nothing remains hidden. Every delay collapses into acceleration, every closed door swings wide, and every unanswered prayer becomes a fulfilled testimony. History itself bends when the Father announces the moment. When God swings open a door, no critic can slam it shut, no demon can bolt it closed, and no whisper of doubt can undo what heaven has decreed. The power of divine authority is final, and when it releases a blessing, it carries an unstoppable force. Revelation 3 verse 8 declares Jesus as the one who opens doors that no man can shut. That verse is not poetic exaggeration. It is the eternal reality of a God whose authority cannot be rivaled. There is a certain confidence that comes when you recognize the source of your blessing. If it had been built by manipulation, it could crumble. If it had been earned solely by human effort, it might falter. Yet when God Himself establishes the work of your hands, no scheme of the enemy has the ability to reverse it. What He ordains stands. Numbers 23 verse 20 reminds us of this truth. When Balaam, hired to curse Israel, was forced to declare, "I have received a command to bless. He has blessed, and I cannot change it." The same God who placed a shield around Israel places his hand upon your destiny, making every curse powerless and every plan of darkness void. What makes God's favor unshakable is its foundation in obedience. It is not rooted in convenience or self-serving ambition, but in surrender to the voice of God. When you align with His will, your provision carries His seal, and no demonic interference can tamper with it. Deuteronomy 28 verse 12 paints the picture of such favor. The heavens open their treasury, pouring rain on your land in season, and causing your hands to prosper. That is not fragile fortune. That is kingdom provision sustained by heaven's covenant. It is remarkable how peace follows the doors God opens. Opportunities birthed by pressure and pride often lead to anxiety, but when grace holds the hinges, rest accompanies the assignment. You may walk into unfamiliar places, but the atmosphere is marked by assurance rather than panic. That is because God does not just open doors, He walks you through them. His presence is the guarantee that His gifts will not break you. Another truth worth clinging to is how divine favor surpasses human striving. Competitors may run, manipulators may plot, but when God decides to elevate you, no earthly strategy can keep pace. Joseph's brothers tried to bury his dream, yet the pit became a passageway to the palace. David was overlooked by his own family, yet the anointing found him in the fields and raised him above every giant. When heaven's hand rests upon your life, you rise not by clawing your way forward, but by being carried by the wind of God's Spirit. Divine provision, however, is never merely about personal comfort. It is a vehicle for kingdom advancement. The influence you gain has assignment. The opportunities laid before you are designed to build, plant, and expand God's reign on earth. When favor is stewarded this way, it multiplies beyond your own household, touching lives, communities, and even generations yet to come. To treat it as personal luxury alone is to miss its true intent. It is meant to flow through you as much as to you. One of the most beautiful results of God's hand at work is the silencing of critics. Those who doubted your obedience, questioned your decisions, or mocked your sacrifices cannot argue with results only God could produce. Their voices fade when confronted with fruit they cannot deny. Just as Balaam was forced to confess God's hand on Israel, your life becomes a testimony that shuts the mouths of doubters and magnifies the glory of the one who called you. Every move of God bears a signature that cannot be forged. Doors open in ways no human could orchestrate. Provision arrives from sources you could never predict. Peace holds you when logic says you should crumble. All of it echoes the truth that heaven's decrees bow to no earthly resistance. When Jesus says yes, no devil, no critic, and no circumstance has the authority to say no. Yet to walk in that reality, you must carry the key. Heaven responds to faith. Faith does more than inspire courage. It stirs the very atmosphere of heaven. It has the power to move mountains, but it also moves the hand of God toward earth. Every time belief rises, heaven leans in. Hebrews 11 verse 1 defines faith as the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. That is not wishful thinking. It is heaven's own language echoing through human hearts. When trust is present, miracles are not distant possibilities, but near realities waiting to break forth. Throughout Scripture, ordinary men and women released extraordinary results because they dared to believe. It does not showcase flawless people. It highlights those who refuse to let doubt have the last word. Noah built an ark in dry land because conviction told him rain was coming. Abraham left everything familiar, stepping into promise without a map. Sarah laughed at her barrenness, but trust turned her laughter into testimony. These were not superhuman saints. They were vessels who allowed confidence in God to govern their decisions. Their lives remind us that faith is the signal heaven cannot ignore. Prayer, when mingled with belief, becomes a furnace for miracles. Words alone may rise like smoke, but conviction turns them into fire that cannot be quenched. Mark 11, verse 22 to 24 reveals Jesus' teaching that when you pray, believe you have already received it, and it will be yours. That principle is not about manipulating outcomes, but about aligning with God's heart so fully that His will becomes your expectation. Trust brings unseen realities into the present, not by human force, but by divine agreement. What is striking is that Jesus only marveled twice during His ministry, and both times it was connected to unwavering belief. In one instance, He commended the centurion whose confidence in His authority surpassed that of Israel. In another, He was astonished at the unbelief in His hometown where miracles were restrained. Imagine that the Savior who calmed storms and raised the dead was amazed not at power or sin, but at the measure of human conviction. That tells us something. Heaven takes notice when trust rises and heaven grieves when doubt prevails. It also functions as a bridge between what is promised and what is visible. It pulls tomorrow's answers into today's reality. Matthew 9, verse 29 records Jesus saying, "According to your belief, let it be done to you." The miracle was measured not by the size of the problem, but by the boldness of their trust. In the same way, what God releases into your life often hinges on how willing you are to believe. This daring vision sees what eyes cannot yet see and declares what lips have not yet spoken. Delays are the furnace where true faith is tested. Anyone can believe when prayers are answered quickly, but what about the seasons when heaven is silent? Trust does not anchor itself to outcomes. It anchors itself to God Himself. If blessings delay, the heart whispers, He is still good. If silence lingers, confidence clings to His character rather than emotions. That posture keeps the spirit steady when circumstances wobble. Persistent trust is not fragile. It withstands storms. Mountain-moving conviction speaks with boldness even when circumstances scream the opposite. This is not arrogance, but confidence in a God who rules creation. Anchored hearts begin to see doors before they open because vision always precedes reality. The Spirit reveals what the natural eye misses, and those who believe become pioneers of a future others cannot yet imagine. Heaven is drawn to such trust. It is not the volume of your prayers or the intensity of your tears that convinces God. It is the unwavering reliance that says, "Lord, you are faithful even now." When trust rises, it signals to heaven that you are prepared for the manifestation of promise. It is as if your spirit declares, "I am ready for what you have spoken." That signal never goes unanswered. Friend, rest is not inactivity. It is trust, wearing peace like armor. The kind heaven teaches is not laziness or neglect, but a posture that declares confidence in the one who never fails. To rest in God is to breathe deeply of His faithfulness, while storms rage, to steady your heart when every voice demands panic, and to choose assurance that the Father's hand is already working. Jesus modeled this so vividly when He slept through a violent storm while His disciples trembled with fear. The boat shook, waters rose, and death seemed near. Yet He remained calm, certain that the Father's plan held every moment in safety. His stillness was not denial of danger, but proof of unshakable trust. Matthew 11, verse 28 to 29, calls the weary to His rest, offering refreshment, not as an escape, but as strength anchored in His presence. Peace is never passive, it carries authority. Trust in God proclaims without words that striving cannot produce what only His Spirit can. Exhaustion drains vision, but stillness renews clarity. Exodus 33, verse 14, reveals God's promise. His presence brings peace, and with it the assurance that His guidance makes burdens light. Where calm reigns decisions, sharp and wisdom flows, and hearts remain steady even when answers delay. Consider the rhythm of Sabbath woven into creation. The seventh day was not simply an empty pause, it was a declaration that blessing flows through trust, not endless labor. To stop and honor God is to confess that your future does not depend on frantic effort, but on divine provision. Psalm 46 verse 10 whispers, "Be still, and know that I am God," reminding us that stillness is not weakness, but recognition of sovereign rule. Fear often pushes people toward hurried solutions, yet those who wait in quiet confidence discover provision hidden in unlikely places. Green pastures and still waters appear not through striving, but through following the shepherd who restores the soul. Anxiety closes ears to heaven's directions, but peace prepares hearts to hear instructions that shift entire seasons. There is a strength that rises only in stillness. Before battles, warriors of faith often pause not to gather weapons, but to gather confidence in God. Waiting before release is not hesitation, it is expectation. It testifies that victory is certain even before the first strike is made. This posture becomes the anthem of those who know promises never fail, even when circumstances look barren. Faith is not always expressed through shouting or marching forward. Sometimes faith is lying down in complete calm, declaring that God's timeline is flawless. Stillness proves that confidence does not depend on visible results, but on the certainty of his character. The enemy despises this posture because nothing unsettles him more than believers who refuse to be moved by fear. Imagine the harvest awaiting those who choose to trust instead of toil. This is heaven's witness, that you believe the ground already holds seed, that the rain will fall, and that fruit will come in its appointed season. Delays no longer torment you when peace governs your heart, for you understand that timing belongs to the Lord, who redeems seasons and restores what was lost. Even silence from heaven becomes less intimidating when calm fills the soul. Stillness teaches that God's quietness does not equal absence. He is near, closer than breath working behind the curtain where human eyes cannot see. Those who wait in peace find themselves ready for divine surprises, positioned for breakthroughs that unfold without warning. Let your heart wear peace like armor. Anxiety cannot pierce it, doubt cannot corrode it, and fear cannot dictate it. This is not resignation. It is alignment with the pace of heaven. While others collapse under pressure, you can stand firm, refreshed by the assurance that the Father is faithful. His promise is not fragile, it is unshakable. Confidence that his word never returns empty. And from that place of rest flows abundance. Your blessing was never designed to end with you, it was built to overflow. When heaven pours out its abundance, it does not come as a trickle barely enough for survival. It arrives as a river that refuses to be contained, touching shores you never imagined. A true breakthrough is never selfish. It carries within it the power to affect households, communities, and even generations yet unborn. Abraham stands as a timeless witness to this truth. His obedience was not simply for his own good, but became the seed that birthed nations. Genesis 22 verse 18 declares, "In your offspring all nations on earth will be blessed because you have obeyed me." One man's willingness to trust set into motion a divine current that has never ceased flowing. That same pattern holds true today. Your act of obedience can shape the destiny of many who may never know your name. Faithful victories always carry invisible audiences. There are people watching silently, weighing your life as evidence of God's reality. Some may never step into a church, but they will read the testimony written on your story. When transformation breaks forth in your life, faith begins to rise in the hearts of those who had nearly given up hope. Your answered prayers can become the spark that awakens someone else's weary soul. Miracles have a magnetic quality. They draw attention not just to what happened, but to who caused it. When doors open for you by divine favor, seekers will come curious about the God behind your blessing. This is why Jesus in Matthew 5, verse 16, instructed his followers to let their light shine before others so that people would see their good works and glorify the Father. Breakthroughs are never about showcasing personal greatness. They are about pointing every eye upward to the source of all grace. Testimonies travel further than any personal influence could ever carry. You may think your story is small, but when shared, it can find its way into places your feet may never walk. One word of what God has done in your life can echo across boundaries of culture, age, and distance. Psalm 145, verse 4 proclaims, "One generation shall commend your works to another, and shall declare your mighty acts." Your miracle, once spoken, becomes a torch passed on, ensuring that God's faithfulness is remembered long after the moment itself. Every ripple touches deeper layers than you realize. When God breaks chains in your life, it is not just for your freedom. Generational patterns shatter when one person decides to fully embrace God's timing. Cycles of fear, poverty, or compromise lose their grip because you refuse to settle for less than His promise. Your choice to walk in faith today protects the children and grandchildren who will inherit a freer tomorrow. Communities too are shifted by one life set aflame with obedience. History shows that revivals often began with a single heart that believed God could do more. Imagine the impact of your story as it inspires neighbors, co-workers, and even strangers to believe again. The same move of God that lifts your household can ignite hope across an entire community, proving that nothing is too broken for heaven to restore. Legacy grows not by hoarding blessings, but by releasing them. The temptation after a breakthrough is to retreat into comfort, to treat blessings as personal trophies. Yet heaven calls us to generosity, to let provision fuel purpose. When resources flow outward, feeding the hungry, clothing the poor, and advancing God's kingdom, blessings take on eternal weight. What started as your personal miracle transforms into a legacy that will outlive you. Provision without purpose fades quickly, but when it fuels mission, its impact stretches far beyond personal comfort. Kingdom-minded people understand that every open door, every answered prayer, and every new level of favor is a tool entrusted to them. With it comes the responsibility to expand God's influence, not just personal security. The ripple effect of breakthrough is measured not only by how much you receive, but by how far its reach extends for His glory. Your life positioned in God's hands becomes a living testament that His timing is perfect and His promise is sure. The miracle you carry will not stop with you. It will echo far beyond your lifetime's borders, blessing those you may never meet, shaping stories you will never hear, and advancing a kingdom that cannot be shaken. Beloved, when the door opens, courage must walk through what fear once guarded. Blessings may unlock new paths, but it is boldness that carries you across the threshold. Opportunities without it are like keys never used, full of promise, but powerless without action. The moment you prayed for eventually arrives, yet its fulfillment requires more than relief. It demands a heart ready to embrace the unknown. The story of Joshua speaks directly into this reality. Standing at the edge of promise, he was not given strategies first, but a command. "Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." Joshua 1, verse 9. Notice how God repeated this instruction again and again. The inheritance was sure, but without bravery the people could not step into it. It was the bridge between wilderness wandering and promised possession. Fear often wages its fiercest battle right before destiny unfolds. It shouts louder at the edge of breakthrough than it ever did in the barren places. The enemy knows that if you move forward in bold faith, he loses ground he once controlled. That is why this strength is not optional, it is essential. 2 Timothy 1 verse 7 reminds us that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. Fear is an intruder. Courage is heaven's gift. Every new season requires stewardship, and stewardship requires boldness. Increase does not come without responsibility. When blessings multiply, it takes strength to manage them with integrity, generosity, and vision. Many pray for abundance but shrink back when the weight of responsibility appears. Yet resolve declares, I will rise to the level of the assignment God has trusted me with. The strength you carry is not your own. It flows from the one who entrusted you with the blessing in the first place. Stepping into the unfamiliar always feels risky. The landscape ahead rarely looks predictable. Yet boldness dares to walk where sight fails, because faith knows the one who goes before. Isaiah 41 verse 10 echoes this assurance. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. True courage does not silence every fear. It simply chooses to obey God louder than fear's threats. Holy boldness births testimonies that hesitation could never write. Think of the Red Sea. If Israel had stayed paralyzed, they would have perished at the water's edge. Think of Esther. If she had remained silent, her people would have faced destruction. Testimonies are born not in comfort, but in decisive action. Your willingness to move when everything screams retreat becomes the very evidence that heaven's power is alive in you. This kind of strength is not recklessness. It is calculated faith anchored in God's promises. It is saying yes when circumstances shout no. It is raising your voice when culture demands silence. It is taking the risk that only faith can navigate, trusting that God will steady your steps. Without it, blessings remain buried. With it, they blossom into legacies. New seasons also require voices unashamed of God's goodness. It takes boldness to speak openly of His faithfulness in a world that often mocks belief. Yet silence robs others of hope. Your declaration of God's goodness may be the very lifeline someone else needs to endure their trial. Bold faith makes you a witness unafraid to carry light into places still bound by darkness. Each time courage rises, fear is defeated. Each time faith steps forward, destiny advances. God has already gone before you, securing the path, scattering opposition, and preparing provision. Your role is to walk with fearless obedience, knowing the outcome rests in His hands. The courage you display is more than personal strength. It is a signal to heaven and earth that you believe God's word more than your own doubts. With every step of fearless obedience, your life will soon preach sermons words could never capture. Without holding a microphone, without stepping onto a platform, your testimony will speak louder than volumes of human reasoning. What God is about to unveil through you will silence critics, ignite faith in doubters, and awaken hearts that once believed miracles were only for the past. Consider Lazarus bound in grave clothes walking out of the tomb at the command of Jesus. John 11 verse 40 to 44 shows how divine timing is never late, even when human hope has already buried the dream. People gathered to mourn, convinced it was over, yet heaven declared otherwise. That single moment announced to the watching world that God's timing is sovereign, unthreatened by delay, and undefeated by death. In the same way, your story will carry undeniable proof that God's appointed time cannot be overturned. Transformation always preaches louder than arguments. Skeptics may debate theology, but they cannot deny a changed life. Psalm 126, verse 1 to 3, captures this perfectly. When the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, we were like those who dreamed. Our mouths were filled with laughter, our tongues with songs of joy. Visible blessing became a living testimony, one that surrounding nations could not explain away. When God restores you publicly, even the hardest hearts are forced to acknowledge His hand at work. Obedience plays a powerful role in this. Breakthroughs are not random. They are tied to trust, surrender, and faith-filled steps that honor the giver. When you obey God's instructions, blessings begin to manifest in ways skeptics cannot explain. They see the fruit, but cannot comprehend the root. That confusion draws them closer until curiosity becomes hunger for the same God who has lifted you. Testimonies are never meant to remain private treasures. Mark 5, verse 19 to 20 records Jesus telling the man once bound by demons to go home and tell others what God had done for him. His restored life became a message spreading across 10 cities. Notice this, the man did not preach polished sermons. He simply revealed the undeniable evidence of God's touch. Likewise, your testimony will ripple outward, influencing more lives than you can count. Even nations can be moved by a single breakthrough. When Israel crossed the Jordan River, the surrounding peoples trembled not at Israel's might, but at Israel's God. Testimonies carry prophetic weight. What he did once, he is able to do again. Your life becomes a preview of what others can believe for a living prophecy that multiplies faith in those who hear. Gratitude ensures these testimonies remain pure. It guards the heart against pride, reminding you that every blessing originates from heaven. Gratitude shifts the focus away from self-congratulation towards celebration of God's goodness. Pride diminishes testimony, but thanksgiving multiplies its reach. When you declare, "This was God, and God alone," your words become arrows pointing straight back to Him, directing others to the true source of every miracle. What begins as an ending often transforms into a beginning once testimony takes root. Lazarus was not just raised. His story became a catalyst for many others to believe. The restoration you are about to experience is not merely for closure, it is a launch pad for new assignments, fresh faith, and greater impact. Endings are often heaven's way of setting the stage for chapters no one expected to be written. Your testimony is not simply for your encouragement, it is a billboard to the world. God uses your visible restoration as a declaration of His timing, faithfulness, and love. Each step forward in victory will say to others, "If He could do it for me, He can surely do it for you." The power of living proof is irresistible because it points not to human strength, but to divine intervention. This is why the coming season carries weight beyond personal relief. It is about kingdom advancement, about drawing hearts, families, and even entire communities into the orbit of God's goodness. The proof of His perfect timing will not remain hidden in your private moments. It will shine in public spaces displayed for all who once doubted. Friend, heaven has waited, prepared, aligned, and now the earth will see it. What once seemed delayed is actually arriving in full force like a tide that no storm could hold back. You stand on the edge of manifestation, and the heavens are declaring that this moment is not another rehearsal, not another waiting season. This is the appointed time. Every generation faces a moment when heaven's clock strikes, and this is yours. The atmosphere itself testifies that the signal to rise has been released. What looked like hesitation was only divine synchronization. When God's command collides with your preparation, the delay breaks and fulfillment rushes in. Romans 8 verse 28 reminds you that all things, both joyful and painful, have been working together, weaving a design only God could orchestrate. Do not mistake silence for abandonment. The seasons where you prayed with tears and heard no answer were not wasted. They were planting seasons, storing prayers like seeds in the soil of faith. Now the harvest has come forth, and what you asked for in private will erupt in public demonstration. Ephesians 3 verse 20 declares that He is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that you ask or think, and this truth is unfolding before your eyes. Closed doors once made you question your value, but they were not rejection, they were protection. God's no was never